San Francisco Bay University is innovating their curriculum with Agility Praxis Pathways, or APP, reflecting their commitment to a new paradigm of higher education. What excites me about the APP model is how it reframes the age old challenge of bridging theory and practice in higher education. While many institutions talk about innovation, San Francisco Bay University has created a framework that actually delivers on the promise of adaptive student centered learning, which is no surprise given your reputation in this area. And here to talk about this model and how it could scale across different disciplines and learning modalities is SFBU Provost Brad Fuster. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Fuster.
Thank you so much, Ray. It's great to see you again, and thanks for having me on.
It's great to see you also. Thanks again. And it's always fascinating to talk with leaders from San Francisco Bay University, given your unique approach, the ways you've decided to distinguish yourselves in the marketplace, your connection to the tech industry. So I'm really excited for this interview. But let's get right down to it. So the APP model emphasizes agility in learning and encompasses three phases, which I love: think, do, and create. Can you walk us through how technology enables this, particularly in terms of meeting diverse student needs, learning styles? For example, I know you have a lot of international students at the institution.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ray. So the Agility Praxis Pathway is really a fresh take on your grandfather's core curriculum. And if you look at what most institutions across the country and probably across the world are doing with respect to their general education or their core curriculum, it's a very disciplinary approach. And so for students flowing into undergrad, it looks and feels a lot like high school. You're taking kind of more of the same stuff. You're taking a math class, a writing class, social science, natural science. And then from those classes, we expect that college students will make meaning and bridge connections and then be able to transfer the knowledge that they've learned in their writing class, math class, social science, literature to their careers and their life in general. And we were probably both educated under that paradigm, and somehow we managed to do it. But the world has changed significantly in the last 20 years, and the world of work is changing right underneath our feet right now. And at San Francisco Bay, we believe that approach to kind of holistic undergraduate education is not really serving students as well as a more interdisciplinary approach. So what the Agility Praxis Pathway does is it combines some of those content areas like history and math and reading with interdisciplinary and skills and durable skills that are explicit to the student. This is how you will use this when you graduate and when you go out into the real world. So all of our courses, there's 10 courses, all required, no choice, and they all have titles that start with how to tell your story. We think it's an important skill, whether you're an engineer, computer scientist, business, psychology, whatever you end up doing. It's a really important skill for students to be able to tell their story and just tell stories in general. So that's bridged with writing, of course, and it's all AI infused. It's the first course that students take. And then there's, 9 more courses behind it. So let me just run them down because I think it'll frame the rest of our conversation. How to design your life, a journey through personal epistemology. So that kind of mashes up philosophy with design thinking, and students actually create a life plan. And we joke that the point of that class is to, at 18 years old, avoid the midlife crisis that is looming for them at 40, because we'll do all that design work ahead of time. How to communicate in a global context. So this is a communication class, but it also takes into account elements of creating an argument or multicultural approaches. And as you mentioned, we have students from over 45 different countries here. And so as you might imagine, just how to communicate in a global context is like an everyday skill here. And in Silicon Valley, if you go to work for any of our neighbors, Tesla, Google, Apple, Microsoft, you are communicating in these are global companies. And so you might be working with a team in India or China or wherever, and it's a super important skill. How to lead actually, is a leadership class that combines history. So we're learning history through great leaders, and we're studying Napoleon and Machiavelli and Aristotle and all of the great leaders through history, and we're infusing AI in it. And so, I was looking in on that class the other day. This is the first semester that we're rolling it out, and we had a student who was having an argument with Stalin, and we loaded Stalin into the AI that we used for the gen ed, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And they were going back and forth. The student was having this argument, like, you're killing people, and how can you justify this? And Stalin was getting more and more angry, and eventually told the student to shut up and sit down. So, some really wild things. But so the students are learning history in a way that they can digest it, and couched in the form of, this is how you'll use this as a leader. There are lessons you can explicitly learn by studying Machiavelli, by studying all of the great leaders, Napoleon, throughout history, right up to Colin Kaepernick, right? Like, there are modern leaders that we can look at and learn from, that the students can really contextualize. How to use math in the real world, the mathematical mindsets that shape our world. So, this class will obviously satisfy the quantitative reasoning, but we're not going to just give problem sets for the sake of watching students do gymnastics with the numbers. They're applied to real, like, actually embedded in the discipline. How your brain works is a mixture of kind of neuroanatomy, but also psychology, right? So we'll trace the pathway from a sodium atom right through to your personality, and students will understand things like emotional intelligence and empathy and personality, addiction, all of those things that they will encounter throughout their career. How to be creative in partnership with computation and machine learning. So this is obviously the future. And so we really need students to learn how to harness the creativity of AI. How to use data science and game thinking for social impact. So while this looks like a stats class, we're connecting it to a social impact at the end of it. How can we thrive scientific inquiry and the future of sustainability? So this is an all-encompassing science class, but also talks about how sustainable our current practices are. And we actually force students to come up with solutions. And then finally, the 10th course, which is a capstone course that sits on top of the first 9 and students will take last, is how to design social innovation impact solutions to thrive. And that's the capstone. And so students will actually launch their own social movement. Here, technology is not an afterthought or a tack onto a 25-year-old curriculum. These are all brand new courses. They were just created a year ago, and we are infusing purposefully from the design stage AI into each class. So it's clear the students will get assignments. We want you to ask AI this question, take what it gives you back, and then iterate on it. I should also mention we have a multi-agent closed AI that we are using, a proprietary system called ALMA, ALMA, ALMA Learning, and we have fed it the entire content of all of these classes, right? And so these classes are designed with such specificity that every single assignment has a rubric, every single course has deliverables and outcomes. Each course has probably an 80 to 100 page syllabus, right? So it is instructor agnostic. The content doesn't matter who's instructing it because it's not lecture based. We're using it in a way that I don't think any other institution in the country is really purposefully integrated AI directly into the curriculum. So the AI is a partner with the facilitator, course facilitator, in making sure the students have this really purposeful experience in our APP coursework.
It's incredible. And I would love to just kind of dive in on something that you mentioned. I mean, you brought up Colin Kaepernick and you brought up the idea of launching social movements. And we are at a somewhat fraught juncture around tensions related to what could be described as social friction. And in the think phase of this curriculum, there's this focus on, it's interesting, increasing intellectual friction while decreasing social friction. And I can imagine how challenging that must be where we are today. How does that play out in practice? What have you seen? And is it just like, is it a non-issue given the kinds of students you have and where you are, or does it actually create some kind of productive tension?
Yeah, I don't think it's a non-issue anywhere. I think it's an issue everywhere. The increasing intellectual friction while decreasing social friction was inspired by an author, Timothy Clark, who writes a lot about psychological safety. He's a psychological safety researcher. Because we're asking students to share such personal experience as part of this class, right? Like, they are such active participants. When we do Design Your Life, we confront them with issues of poverty or issues of social class or issues of mental health. And they are sharing their family systems, their family experience, and what they want to do with their life. The only way to make this a meaningful experience for everyone involved is to make sure that the students first and foremost feel safe doing that. And so how do we do that? How do we build safety? How do we build psychological safety in the classroom? Well, another innovation at SFBU is that all of our faculty have mandatory pedagogical training, which seems obvious to any other industry, but in higher ed, we hire PhDs who are awesome in their one small area of the curriculum, and then we set them loose in the classroom with very little, if any, pedagogical underpinnings. So they teach like they were taught, which is maybe not the best model. And if you go to a large research university, you have a doctoral student who is teaching the undergraduate core curriculum. I was one of those, so I get it, with very little training, right? In how to actually curate an experience for students, which is what we're trying to do with this Gen Ed. So we have founded a center within SFBU called SFBU, the Center for Empowerment and Pedagogical Innovation. And we have a chief learning officer who's not me, I'm the chief academic officer. We have a chief learning officer who is expert in teaching and learning. And if you look at, lots of universities have a center for teaching and learning, usually a participatory, like self-elected activity, or it's the place where you send broken faculty to learn how to teach and they're there against their will. Here we just expect every single faculty member who's teaching will participate in the SFBU trainings, and they're then empowered with a common vocabulary so it doesn't feel hodgepodgey when students go from class to class to class. And we're talking about how can we make students feel safe? How can we get them up and participating? What are some prompts that you could give them? How can we give them frequent assessments? How can we do these kind of micro learnings as part of every class? So very quickly, the environment in the classroom is established where students feel safe sharing some things. And there's some disclosure from the faculty too. Look, when I was 20, I had this happen. And it adds to the pool of shared meaning and it helps students feel safe. All of these courses I want to mention there are 5 large outcomes to these 10 classes: Tech Trendsetter, Global Navigator, Tenacious Leader, Interpersonally Gifted, and Enlightened Thinker. And then underneath those 5 categories, there's a set of behavioral indicators that we're looking for to measure and assess how well is this course actually working. And we validated this with folks in the industry, with HR professionals in all of the mega companies that surround us, with alumni, with faculty, with students, and so it's pretty well validated.
It's a really interesting bridging of academic theory and practical application, and clearly a focus of the institution as well as the program. I'm curious, and that kind of comes out in the do phase, that second phase as well. You mentioned working with industry and human resources professionals. What has been the employer feedback? What have you heard? Maybe it's too early to have kind of student feedback, but maybe in terms of showing industry what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
Has there been sort of a, yes, this is the direction we want to go in. Yes, this is what we need. Because I think that a lot of companies are struggling with this right now as they try to understand how they can create productive workplaces that are welcoming and inclusive, but not cross some line that they've now put in the sand or that some government entity has.
Right. I think if you were to talk to industry professionals, they'll tell you that there's really no shortage of content expertise, right? If you want to hire an engineer in Silicon Valley, there are 100 who are excited to take your job. What there is a shortage of durable skills that will allow that engineer to pivot 16 times within the course of a 20-year career and be happy doing it and be satisfied doing it. So yeah, we have validated the curriculum, as I said, with I think it was 47 different companies. And we said, look, what are the skills that are most important to you? And, it's not things like social science, and it is not things like, solving quadratic equations. It's things like empathetic leader and interpersonally gifted, tech trendsetter, people who can be really facile and agile with the way they think about things and the way they solve problems. Because, look, 5-10 years ago, Silicon Valley did not imagine AI coming to scale so quickly in 2024, 2025. And here it is, right? It's free, it's available, everybody has it. So that's changing the nature of white collar work. It's changing the world. And if we didn't prepare students to adapt to that technology, shame on us, shame on higher ed.
It's interesting. Shame on higher ed for a lot of things. It kind of reminded of one of your earlier answers. We probably both had faculty, maybe as undergraduates and graduate students, that would never want to do most of this stuff, that they would look at this and go, what do you mean it can't just be about engineering or social science or quadratic equations? And it is a paradigm shift. So, I mean, this comes out in the create phase, that third and final phase of APP, but I just want to kind of shift the question towards, how are you getting your faculty to do this? How are they adapting their teaching models or their processes to fit into this student learning model, which frankly, as you said, most of them were not trained in or have used before?
Yeah. That's what keeps my job interesting, Ray. That's what keeps us on our toes here. So, these are all new classes. They're rolling out this academic year for the first time, and we've hired all new faculty to teach them. So very few, if any, I don't think any of the current faculty at SFBU are teaching in the APP curriculum. So we are out there seeking faculty who are very interesting, kind of multi-hyphenate folks who have had a multitude of careers and interests and passions in various different disciplines. And it is kind of a needle in a haystack. And then to get them like here in Fremont, like, hey, can you come deliver this to these small classes of 20 students? That is our challenge. So I'll give you an example. How to communicate in a global context. We're teaching that for the first time this year. And I found a faculty member named Anoop Judge. She is a novelist. She's an author, but she's also an attorney. And English is her second language. So, she emigrated here. So how to communicate in a global context. I found a person who's a novelist, who is really good at making arguments because they went to law school and had to personally navigate immigration to the United States. And she also taught at the Stanford Extension. So she checked every box, and she designed that course with our kind of learning architect, Tracy Clark, who's in Texas, who was really the brains behind much of this, with our VP for strategy, Heather Herrera, and our president, Nick Ladani, and Tracy kind of put pen to paper to come up with the framework. But now it's my job to operationalize this stuff. And so I'm seeking people like Anoop. I'm seeking people, for the How to Design Your Life class from the Stanford D School, who, have been trained in design thinking. For How to Tell Your Story, we have a wonderful colleague who has experience both in storytelling and infusing AI into that. And so, I think we're also situated in a place where these people are here. If San Francisco Bay University was in, the middle of the country somewhere, there would be a smaller talent pool to be able to do this. So we are blessed by our location. We're trying to capitalize on that.
There's so much more I want to ask, but I think we're going to have to leave it there because this is exciting. And I know there's so much more we could talk about. I'm excited to see the future and what happens next for the APP program. Dr. Brad Fuster, Provost at San Francisco Bay University. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ray. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Here's my take. San Francisco Bay University has always and continues to boldly challenge traditional academic silos by asking faculty to expand beyond pure content delivery into nurturing practical skills and social awareness. This is unique. This shift towards integrating employability and social impact into core coursework reflects a growing recognition that universities must evolve to meet the career needs of students and society's broader challenges. And those that don't won't be around much longer. While some faculty may initially resist moving outside their comfort zones, this holistic approach to education, which I see as combining academic rigor with real-world skills and social consciousness, is inspiring. And it's where faculty are going to need to go to be successful in the future as institutions grapple with some of the issues and transformations we discussed.